My name is Devon. I'm a musician, a wannabe actor and writer, and I've been releasing music under my name and under the name Surface of the Sun for about 12 or 13 years now. And I have one self-published book, Skyview. I'm working on the second and third. And I have, I think, 6 different musical releases under my name. I'm losing track. You and I have been pretty busy this.
Welcome to my channel where we talk about all things self-publishing and book cover design. I had a conversation a few weeks back with one of my favorite clients, Devon, who is a very multi-talented guy. He's an actor, he's a musician, but he's also a self-published author. So I just had to sit down with him and talk to him about his process. So hope you enjoy the interview. Check it out.
Yeah, it has been a long time. I'm doing well, thanks. All this extra time at home and, not having to commute and, just trying to find the positive that I can in it. A lot of the activities I like to do were kind of shut down, and I just thought, how can I maximize, this unfortunate situation that we're in to make it fortunate in some way. And I've just been going crazy with music and my acting training and
Yeah, so
writing.
you've been so busy.
I know it's been amazing. Like, a lot of people are getting bored, stuck at home, and I'm thinking, holy cow, I've never been so busy.
Yeah, you're doing so much. I mean, every
Yeah.
time that you email me and like, I have this new thing, can you help me with this? And I'm just like, when do you sleep?
Yeah, I know. I just messaged you about uploading the third album cover to the webpage for this year, right? Like, it's been super productive.
Talk to me about your writer's journey. When was that moment for you that you decided to write?
So I went through this phase. So when I was really young, I read nonstop. I was going through, you remember Goosebump books?
Uh-huh.
Like, I was going through like one of those a day kind of thing. And I remember this moment where I'm like, okay, I need something with more substance. So I went to my library at elementary school, and I asked the librarian. I said, I want like a fantasy books, dragons, and all this. And she took me to The Hobbit. I remember her walking me down the aisle, and that moment right there was really, really big for me when it came to really appreciating literature and books and stories and all of that.
Uh-huh.
And then fast forward, I got to this point in like my 20s or something where I just couldn't focus on stories. I was reading a lot of scientific papers and different things, technical stuff for school and all of that. But for whatever reason, I struggled with keeping focus on stories.
Yeah.
And then I got into Harry Potter in my late 20s.
Of course.
Which was way too late. And then I just devoured those. So it just kickstarted this whole love for reading again. And since that time, like at 2000, we'll say 2008ish or so, I started like, I want to get back to more reading and writing. I started cataloging all these ideas for this fantasy story, which I'm still archiving all these ideas when they come to me. But I thought, as my first adventure back into writing since high school, I didn't want to like take on this huge task of creating this world and this land and all these different races and all this stuff. And then I was struggling to sleep one night, and I'd been laying in bed for like 2 hours. And then for whatever reason, the idea for Skyview popped into my head. I thought, okay, this requires less world creation. I think I'm going to start with this and just kind of see how it goes. So this fantasy idea is still there, 10 years in the making. I'll get to it someday.
So as you just said, a lot of authors have multiple ideas that they want to write eventually. But what is it about this story in particular that felt like the right story for you to start with?
I think there's a lot of relevance in this story to a lot of the challenges that we're facing presently in the world, whether it be environmental, political, societal, a lot of these things. I like to weave that into work that I do. It's even a part of the music that I do as well. And so I think there's a lot of relevance there, but I think there's also a lot of hope. So it's very, even though it has this sci-fi element to it and this element that makes it larger than normal everyday kind of life, right? That makes it bigger, that makes it a little awe-inspiring. It's still rooted in reality in some way. So it's kind of like an enhancement to reality, really, right? So it's kind of it's very easy to relate to, I think, in so many ways for so many different people, from where the characters come from, some of the troubles they run into, their reasoning for doing things. And I like starting in a place that felt real, that I could augment in some way to make the everyday a little bit more hopeful, a little bit more exciting.
Can you tell us a little bit about your process? Like, did you from the very start knew that you were gonna write a series, or sort of became so?
Yeah, it turned into a series.
Okay.
My I set my goal as just writing the first one, to whatever to the best I could do at that point in the time. That's kind of the way I look at things as an artist, whether it's my acting or my music or the writing. It's
Like, just do
you know,
it.
just do it like
Yeah.
this. I do the best I can do,
Yeah.
and it doesn't mean that it's bad. It doesn't mean that it's amazing. It
Yeah.
means that probably the next time around I can do better because I'm going to grow. But I know that I put everything I can into it, and
Yeah.
I'm proud of that. And that's just the way it goes. So this was my first venture into writing a full length proper story novel. So I just set it as that goal to write something I'd be proud of at the end. Whatever happened after that, if people liked it, then that was kind of icing on the cake, you know.
So perhaps you can elaborate on that a bit, because I actually think that a lot of writers have that particular problem. They overplan, they overthink, and it actually stops them from writing.
So when I was working on my first album, uh, I would do something and I go, oh, what if I try this? What if I try that? And there's a little bit of a perfectionist in me. I take a lot of pride in what I do. I like to do the best that I can, et cetera, et
Hmm.
cetera. But I heard this quote, and I cannot for the life of me remember who originally said it or the exact words, but it was basically an artist never finishes anything, they just quit working on it. And I heard that in about 2007, and that really resonated with me. And the way I interpreted it was that in the area of creation, whether you're creating something, you
Yeah.
can continually massage it, you can continually change it. There is never actually a clearly defined finished product.
Hmm.
It's when you decide it's going to be finished. So that allowed me to get to this point to realize, you know what, like I can beat this thing to death, and
Hmm.
I'll never be at some point I have to go, this is the best that I can do right now, and that's okay, and
Hmm.
then move on. I look back at every piece of music I've released, the book, and I can pick it apart and go, oh, I can't believe I did this, oh, I can't believe I did this. But that was me 10 years ago or 5 years ago, right?
Yes.
And I'm in a different place now, and it shows in my production of music. It shows in my writing. The amount of work the editor has to do is far less. My beta readers have less negative feedback, so it's part of the whole process. And I know that all of this is individual steps along that
It's
journey.
like
So
it's like an art of the art of letting go as well, and just
absolutely,
realizing. So you had this idea in your head that one night, and you said, "Okay, I just have to write it down." Like, how
yeah.
long did it took you? Did you have to like go back to countless of rewrites? Like, what was the process like for you?
So I had the idea. I think it was April, of 2007, 18, 17. It was around April. I remember that. And then it was a couple months later I started just like a prologue, like an intro chapter, just to kind of see how it felt. And I had this approach to it that after kind of writing it out, it didn't feel very good. So I kind of just hummed and hawed over it a little bit, and then by October I kind of changed which character I was going to focus on, because I only had two characters at that point in time. And I realized, you know what, it's far more interesting if I switch to the other character. And that came in October. And then I just started writing. And it was 3 months later, I had the first draft of the novel, uh, which felt super, super quick. But it was only intended to be just a standalone book. Like it was, I kind of set the parameters for my first venture into this, like I said, and I'm like, here's my target, and
Mhm.
that's what I'm going to write to. And then by the time I got to the end of writing, I'm like, man, I really love this. Like, this is so much fun. I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm just having a blast, right? Like I say, if people like it, that's kind of secondary. My goal is just to have fun and make something I'm proud of. And I'm like, okay, so I got to leave it a little bit open at the end now, even though I wasn't like thinking beyond that.
Yeah.
I kind of had like a rough idea of what the ending was going to be like, but not too specific. We'll say like 75% nailed down about the key points. And I just kind of weaved my way there. It was just very much as it kind of came up, I just hit these key points along the way. So it was very much improvised, kind of front to back, which is very similar to how my music goes. I just kind of get into the mode and know that whatever comes out is going to need to be tweaked. It might need to be deleted, and that's okay. That's part of creating, right? I would rather let this avalanche of stuff come out of me and delete later than restrict myself from the get go. I don't find that to be very helpful, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good thing to remind them if that there's always the editing comes later. You should really just like you just said, like just bring everything out, just flush it out, write it, put it in a page, and then edit instead of the other way around because you then get stuck in that loop and you can continue. And even though that's also okay, it's part of the journey of like you said, learning and
Hmm.
continue to learn. It's definitely from what I've seen, a big part of the struggle of actually getting your book published. Do you plan on writing a third novel? I asked you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what's a little bit different after I finished the first one, and I realized, holy cow, I really enjoy this. This is amazing.
Okay.
I looked at book 2 and 3 in the Skyview series as more of a single story. So in the first book, I looked to the end of book 1. Now I've looked to the end of book 3, right? So book 2 and 3 really go together as kind of two halves, but it is going to be a trilogy. So yeah, I'm actually this
Excited.
morning before we talked, I'm going through an editing, doing an editing pass on book 2. I've started book 3, um, but to go back to kind of what we're talking about before, after it's done, like I got to hire an editor who's going to catch all the grammatical things and stuff like that. Um, but I give myself a little bit of a break to kind of pull my head out of it. Like if you live in it too much, I think it's very easy to actually lose sight and lose context and lose reference to what's outside of the book.
Hmm.
So I finished book 2 last December, and then some things really started taking off with my music. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go down that path, and then I've done those releases and the music videos and the acting and the short films I've been on, which was okay. As much as I really wanted to finish up book 2, I'm like, I know it's just going to serve me by taking that break from it because now I'm coming back
Yes,
to it, and I'm reading paragraphs and pages, going, holy cow, I wrote that. That's pretty cool, right?
that's a
It's
great
been
point.
8 or 9 months, right? So I'm coming through it with a little bit of more of a fresh mind when I'm doing the editing, and I'm not so attached to certain things. And the other thing I wanted to add, after I finished book 1 and I realized I really wanted to continue doing it, I used a few months of time to study and to learn a little bit more and to enhance my writing. And one of the most helpful things I read was Stephen King's book on writing, and it was actually the first Stephen King thing I ever read. And it's quasi training, quasi autobiography, but in the middle of it, he references um, Shrunk is the name of another book. It's kind of like the writer's Bible. I think it's been around since the early 1900s. And he's got some key advice in there, like omit needless words, use active voice over passive voice, all that sort of thing. And in reading this Stephen King autobiography, he talks about
Mhm,
his process. He's like, as a writer, after your first draft, expect to delete like 10 to 20% of your work and be
mhm,
okay with that. And I'm like,
mhm,
okay. So I felt a little bit better realizing on my first pass that, I need to cut out this whole chapter. I need to delete this paragraph. Holy
mhm.
crap, look how many words I used to say one simple thing. And that was just a nice little bit of a confidence booster to even though I kind of felt a little bit harsh towards my work after that first break, I realized that's normal even for a veteran writer. And then I was much
Absolutely.
easier on myself, and then I just kind of got into the fun process of editing and tweaking.
Absolutely. And it kind of when you were talking, kind of reminded me of my own process with when it comes to design. Sometimes um I stare at something for so long,
Yeah,
like the same cover or whatever I'm working on, that I stop seeing the little things. And I
yeah,
have to like really take a couple of days at least to clear my mind, work on something else, and then come back. And then I'm like, oh yeah, that looks better here. That looks better there. So I can totally relate to it, and I can see how that would really help when it comes to writing.
I think it's a very good skill to be able to, you know, learn how to take that step back
Mm-hmm.
and look at things from an outside perspective, to not be so objective about, to be more
Mm-hmm.
subjective, and then to also trust other people when you realize that those biases are playing in. And I found that very helpful in my writing when a beta reader would give me feedback,
Mm-hmm.
and I would go, okay, why am I attached to this thing? Is it really necessary, or is their point valid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's happened in my music. It happened recently in some acting I was doing on a video. I looked at something and I judged myself so hard. I'm like, oh gosh, I hate my face right now. Like, I hate that expression. It's horrible, but I trust the director that I was working with and the individual doing the editing. And then I'm like, what do you think? And they're like, we like it. And I'm like, are you sure? And they're like, yeah. And I go, okay, I trust you more than me right now. And being able to do that in any sort of creative process, I think is really important, because sometimes we're just going to tear everything we do apart, and it's really not that bad.
That's such an important thing to talk about. Like, how did you reach out to beta readers? When was the time where you felt like you needed them? At what point in your process?
I For book one, I brought them in. I think it was after my second editing pass. I was a bit slower through the process on one than two, just as I was learning. So I did an editing pass, took a break, did another one, and then I sent it to him, and I brought him in at that point. And I picked three people that I knew, which there's positives and negatives to that. But I picked all of them were close friends or family. One does write. So I was getting a perspective from somebody who would automatically go to the writer's mindset. I
Mm-hmm.
picked somebody who is just a reader and loves to read things. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'm getting the perspective of somebody who's coming from, hopefully somebody would go out and buy the book in the future and just take
Mm-hmm.
it for what it is. And then I picked somebody who's extremely anal and OCD about stuff, to see if there's any uh, issues within the book, like things contradicting itself or whatever. And that individual actually picked out something very important at the end and said, I don't think this would happen with this character because, and I'm like, that's why I picked you as a beta reader. Um, but yeah, it's always tough to receive negative feedback, and it can be still, even if it's some sort of criticism to help improve what it is you're doing,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So I think it's a good challenge for everybody, and I think that's why it's important that you, if it's your first time doing it, you pick the people that you trust and you know are on your side, and they're going to give honest feedback, but it's feedback you're going to be able to accept as being there to help you. Again, when it comes, when you're dealing with a 100-page manuscript, saying there's 100,000 words in it, you're going to miss stuff.
Yes.
You can't, it's so hard to see everything and not have errors in that. We're humans, we're all fallible, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
you can bring people in your close circle and be part of your team to make that as best as you can at that point in time,
Yes.
then that's an awesome thing if they're willing to give that time for it. So I took them all up for sushi afterwards as a thank you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. And like you also, I like your approach because you were looking for different perspectives. And that's probably what you need because at the end of the day, your goal is to, I suppose, attract the widest variety of
Yeah.
readers as at the same time. So that's a really good strategy, and I hadn't considered that at all. That's good to know. Of
You don't have to accept all feedback. I mean, you
course.
accept the feedback, you consider it, but it doesn't mean you have to change something as a result of it, right? But if you can get a different perspective, or if you can get somebody who doesn't read fantasy to go, you know what? I actually got into that. I really like, the relationship. Maybe they like romance novels, and they thought you did a great job of two characters and the little love triangle, three characters in the love triangle that was going on. Or maybe they said, you know what, there wasn't enough emotional connection to connect me. And then you can go, well, it's a fantasy story, but yeah, having connection between characters is important. So maybe you can revisit that.
Exactly. Like you're
Yeah.
looking at different points of view. Any other stories are you working on right now?
My brain's always going with stuff, and when ideas come up, I just usually put them in my phone or write them down somewhere. So I have a couple, but as you know, the last year I've been diving really heavily into acting,
Yes.
and I'm in a feature length indie film right now, and I've done some shorts, and I just got a role in a series, a docu series coming up where I get to play soldier.
Oh,
So I'm kind
congratulations.
of I'm absolutely loving this new adventure that I'm on. So I don't know if I want these to be a book or to just go right to a screenplay of some sort. So I'm tossing that idea around. But right now, finish up book two. I hope to get it off to an editor this year, and then continue book three, and then we'll see what happens after that.
That's awesome. So I'm curious, how did you started acting? Like, it doesn't surprise me now because you're like a multi-talented guy, but I'm just curious how you started doing that.
Uh, so acting is the first thing I really wanted to do when I was younger.
Oh yeah?
Before music, before writing, I remember asking my parents if I could go. I grew up in northern part of British Columbia, if you recall. I wanted to come down here to the Vancouver area and go to this acting high school,
Oh
and
yeah?
they're like, no, no, not a chance, not a chance. And then when so I did a little bit in drama and everything, and I just always fascinated with it. I thought I would love it because I was always joking around and playing around. And then in the grade eight, I discovered guitar. And then that kind of derailed everything. And then I've been on the music path in a big way since then, working in recording studios and all of that. But
Mhm.
there's always this little voice kind of in the back of my head saying, you need to try acting, you need to try acting. And it just didn't get the priority because of my day job and safety and the career I was building there, and then using my free time for music. Yeah, so last year, after some success with one of my albums, and I had that top 40 song on the radio for a while. And then I released some other stuff, and I thought, you know what, I want to do a music video. I want to, but do not like a typical music video where the band's pretending to play and everything, because it's just me. It's a solo project. I thought, well, let's do a narrative. Like, let's make this something worth watching,
Yeah.
and create a opportunity to force me to be in front of the camera, which is something I've thought about since I was a kid. So I took a foundations course, a weekend acting course at this school that I went and checked out. Had an amazing time. Shot the video. Rolled around in the mud all day. I was just gross. It was just this incredible day making this music video, and I had so much fun doing it. I thought, you know what, I really have to prioritize giving this a go. So I went back to that school, started taking some classes last fall, started auditioning, and in less than a year, I've got a few roles. I have an agent now, and I love it. It's so much fun.
And the storytelling skill that you have probably helps you with the
I
acting
think
or vice
so.
versa even.
I think it's all connected, and
Yeah.
even the music as well too, because music is all emotion.
Mhm.
It's about um, portraying an emotion or making feel people feel some sort of have an emotional response, right? Art is that as well too. You'll see something, you'll feel a certain way, whether it's a visual, whether it's written. So I think they're all connected, and because I've been so tapped into my emotions in some way through art for so long, I think it just kind of naturally ties everything together. It makes it a little bit more comfortable. I have no problem going to the really crazy places in acting class. I don't have the barriers are long gone. So
Oh, it's awesome. Well, congratulations. I'm so happy for you.
thank
And
you.
it's always such a joy to see you, obviously send me work, but at the same time, at the same time, it's so cool to see all the stuff that you're doing. It's
Thank
so
you.
awesome. Is there any other piece of advice that you can give out to authors?
Yeah, I guess my best piece of advice, and of course this is my viewpoint on all of it, right?
Yeah.
I think with any of the artistic career paths are extremely tough. They're very very tough. I'm in three now. Like it's tough to make it go, and abilities generally have very little to do with it. Unfortunately, right?
Mhm.
I came to this after a part of my journey in life and the things that I've experienced, and I found for me the reason that I do it is for the challenge, is to make something that I'm proud of. It's the creation, it's the doing.
Mhm.
Um, so I think it's important to know why you're doing it and to be comfortable with that and understand that, right? Because I
Mhm.
think a lot of people want to do it because they like it, but then are affected by what happens or doesn't happen afterwards.
Mhm.
Which, when you're getting into the entertainment industry, there's so little control you have out there.
Hmm.
And more often than not, it's not a reflection of you or your abilities or everything. I mean, it's just impossible to get heard.
Hmm.
I've had a song on the top 40 in Canada now for like 4 months, and then nothing, right? Like it doesn't, like it just comes and goes. It's all over the place. So my advice is, think about why you want to do it, and then keep that at the forefront of your mind. For me, I want to create something and enjoy the journey and create something that I'm proud of. What
Hmm.
happens after is secondary. Yes, obviously I'd like to be able to survive off of doing it, right? And have an income. But that's secondary to me. And if I get hung up on that, it's going to sour the rest of the process. So
Hmm.
my advice would be, figure out why you want to do it,
Hmm.
and stick to that, and be comfortable with that, and let everything else just be gravy and cherry on top and all of that. My other advice too, and this is an interesting one, and you run into all the time. Society has kind of moved, not kind of, it has, uh, in the last 20 years, moved into this place where uh, people kind of feel entitled when it comes to getting artistic works. Everybody wants it for free,
Hmm.
right? And Napster was a big example of this, and the music industry has never been the same from that. And now you have Spotify, where artists are not getting any money for their work still. It's all going to companies and corporations. So it's very tough to get paid for what your work is actually worth these
Hmm.
days, if it's something that's sold or exchanged in a digital format,
Hmm.
right? Prints, like artistic prints and photographs, you still pay for, but you can't get a digital copy and paste and send it to somebody else, right? And so what's happening is a lot of people are selling their stuff for next to nothing to try to get noticed, or giving it away for free. And while there is some logic in that, my opinion and my thought is it's shooting all of us in the foot,
Hmm.
right? Because all of a sudden, if you want somebody to get your book, now you got to give it away for less than the other person if somebody starts doing that. And then
Hmm.
now we're all putting crazy time and effort and putting our hearts and souls into all these things we're doing and giving it up there. And then we're actually giving it away for free. So I would say, if you're doing something, you're doing all that, it's worth something. My opinion is, I would rather sell one book for $8 than 100 books for 8 cents. You know what I mean? So I think and I think the stuff is worth that. Everybody on a day-to-day basis relies and needs art to escape, to enjoy life. Every human being has that in some form, yet everybody's kind of devalued it. So I would, encourage you to recognize the value in what you do, and say that
Hmm.
it's okay to support yourself and ask for what's fair, and to support the rest of the community. Because right now, I don't think we're helping ourselves as artists by doing that. I think we're just further guaranteeing the chance that we're not going to get compensated for this beautiful things that we create.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's such a good point. Especially when it comes to a story, it's so much work, right? I can't even imagine. And you have to value the amazing work that you've done.
yeah.
I find it very motivational for authors to think about those things. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks so much, Devon. It's been a
Oh,
pleasure.
oh, this was
Um,
awesome. Yeah. You can find me at devonacres.com, which is where the music released under my solo music under my name is database, and there's links to the stores and everything. My work as an author is there, and we're working on getting my acting stuff up there as well. So you can find me there, or you can find my other music at surfaceofthesun.com, which is the heavier side of the music that I do. So any of those two web pages are good, and then from there you can find my Instagram and Facebook and all of that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your continued support and interest in our services. And obviously, like I said, I'm just very proud of you and just very happy to see everything that you're doing.
Oh, that's really nice. Thanks. And yeah, I'm glad we met all those years ago. I was just reliving when we went to that coffee shop, and we were talking about the cover, and then we did the
And Harry
photographs with your
Potter, we talked
sister,
about
and we're
Harry
talking. Oh, we geeked about
Potter.
Harry Potter. No, I'm so glad we connected. It's been an amazing journey. Your work just always blows my mind. Every time I'm like, hey, okay, let's do this, and you send me something, I'm like, it's perfect. I love it. It's great. So no, you're my go-to person without doubt. So this has been an amazing in the last few years working with you, and I know you're always there to support and bounce ideas off of, and when you do something, it just works out. It's just fantastic in the end. So I have total faith in you. Yeah,
Thank you. Thanks
you're
so
very welcome.
much.